Okay, Leon is unfortunately unwell and is in hospital. So we wish him well, and we'll dedicate our shiur to a refuah shalema for Leon. And hopefully he'll be back with us very soon. Right, we are talking about Sanhedrin. We were talking about Semicha last week, and we were talking about the different types of Semicha, classical Semicha or real Semicha, which was passed down from Moshe to Yoshua to the elders to everybody else in the chain, and ended in sometime in the 4th or 5th century, depending on which opinion you go by. Several attempts over the years and centuries to reinstate classical Semicha, notably in the 16th, 17th century. Rav Yosef Karo, who you may well have heard of, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, he was given classical Semicha, although it wasn't altogether recognized. Anyway, it fell into disrepute. There was another attempt to re-enact it in modern times, and that didn't work either. So the Semicha that we have today is not the classical Semicha. It is a title which is given to people who have been examined in various different topics, and you can get a Semicha in all sorts of different things, or you can have a wide-ranging Semicha, etc. And I showed you last week, I showed you my own certificate, I showed you that of my son, and I told you about the Dayan's Semicha, which is called Yadin Yadin. Now, I have put on the Sanhedrin WhatsApp group a link which David Mark sent to me of a very, very good summary article about Semicha. Very useful indeed. Thank you for that, David. Everyone can access that now on the Sanhedrin WhatsApp group. You can have a look at that in your own time. Very good article, very good summary, all about Semicha. Very interesting. Now, we left the shiur last week at the end with a question. Can anybody remember what the question was? In which case, none of you will know the answer then, except for David, because he remembered what the question was because he sent me the answer. Now, the question was this. We learned in the Gemarah that the word Semicha means leaning, and it came to mean rabbinical ordination because Moshe leaned his hands, vayismoch alav et yedehem, he leaned his hands upon Joshua and gave him the leadership, as it were, passed on the leadership. And so that became known as Semicha. And I asked the question, two questions really. One, why don't we get Semicha? Why doesn't Semicha today involve leaning of hands? I was a bit disappointed when I got mine, thought I was going to get my head leaned on, but didn't happen. And more of a question, classical Semicha back in the day, before it finished in the 4th or 5th century, 4th or 5th century CE, also did not involve actual leaning on the person. How do we know that? Because it's in our Gemarah. Let's go to our Gemarah now and have a look at the text.
We lean on you to give us shiurim, Johnny.
I'm not sure that counts, Johnny, but maybe. Right, there's the screen. Do you have the text? Yeah. Okay. So, this is where we ended last week. Over here, Amalei Rav Acha Breda Rava le Rav Ashi. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, Bida mamash samchin lei? Question mark. You can see the word in the middle of that word. Yad. Okay. Bida. See the word yad in the middle of that? Bida mamash. You know what mamash means? Really? Is it really with the hand that they lean upon him? In other words, this is time written at the time of the Gemarah, when Semicha, classical Semicha, was still going on. And the question that Rav Acha is asking is it true that they lean with their hands? Do they actually physically lean with their hands? Amalei, Rav Ashi answered him, Samchin le bishma. They lean on him by name, and that doesn't make sense, of course, because the whole point of Semicha is that it's from the word Semicha, which means to lean. So the answer is no, you don't lean on him by hands, with your hands. What you do is Samchin le bishma. He is ordained by name, Kari le Rabbi. He is given the title Rabbi. So it's a formal declaration, if you like, that the person is a rabbi and has smicha. It is not, this is according to Rav Ashi, it is not an actual leaning by hand that was done, which begs the question why it's still called smicha, or why it was called smicha in the first place. And we'll see in a second. But yeah, have they?
Question.
Yes.
The people with the title of Rav, have they got any form of qualification?
Okay, now that's interesting. If you have a look at the article that, okay, let me just finish this bit and then we'll come to that question, because that's an interesting question. So, Kari le Rebbe, they call him a rabbi. Vayahavi le Rishuta le Meidan Dine Knasot. And he is given permission thereby, by getting this title, by getting, I suppose, the degree of rabbi, he is now allowed, Yahweh, he's brought lay to him, Rishuta, the permission, Lemeidan, see the word dan in there, to judge, Dine Knasot. Everyone knows what a knas is, yeah? A knas is what you get when you go too fast on the roads. It's a fine, okay? Or if you leave your rubbish out on the wrong day and you get caught, you get a knas, you get a fine. So you are by having this title Rebbe, you are now allowed to judge matters regarding the laws of fines. Okay. Now, Julia has raised an interesting question. There are a number of different titles that rabbis are given in the Gemarah. Okay. Nowadays, everybody is just called rabbi, or if you're in Israel, you're called Rav. Okay, Rav is just the Israeli Hebrew word for rabbi. Okay, the Gemarah has 3 different titles for rabbi. Who can tell me what they are? Well, Rav is one of them. Rav Yehuda. Okay, here's Rav Acha. Okay, Rav Acha Berei de Rava le Rav Ashi. And here's another one. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Okay, Rav is one title, Rabbi is another title, and there's a third title. Anybody know the third title that is given? So Rav, Rabbi, and the third one?
Rebbe.
Rebbe's Yiddish, really. Rebbe is Yiddish. Okay, I'll give you a clue. Gamliel. What was Go on, Michael.
Rabban.
Rabban.
Rabban, yes, Rabban.
Rabban,
Rabban Gamliel. What other Rabbans do you know?
Robin Hood.
Well, you know Rabban Gamliel, and you know his son as well. Rabban, who was his son? Rabban something Ben Gamliel.
Shimon.
Yes, well done, John. It was on the tip of your tongue. Yes, Rabban Shimon Ben Gamliel. And there's another famous Rabban who I'm going to speak about on Tisha B'Av. Unfortunately, not here, but I'm going to have to zoom it to you because I'm going to be in Manchester, unfortunately. There's another Rabban, a famous Rabban, which is connected, or who is connected to Tisha B'Av. Anyone? David, you know who I'm referring to?
Yochanan ben Zakkai.
That's it, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. We'll speak about him a bit more on Tisha B'Av. Right, so Julia's raised the question. So tell me, Julia, any suggestions as to what the three different titles might mean?
Well, the only thing that comes to my mind is that in our shul in Liverpool, we used to have Reverend Mallets, who then passed more exams and became Rabbi Mallets. We had other reverends, so I'm assuming that they've passed fewer exams.
Yes, that is true. The Reverend Mallets, passed no exams until he became Rabbi Mallets. When he did get smicha, presumably because he'd been examined and was and did that. So the term in the United Synagogue, the term Reverend, Rev, is really an honorific title for the leader of a community who doesn't have smicha. Those of you from Manchester will the most famous reverend who didn't get smicha in Manchester was Johnny?
Gabriel Brodie.
Yes, Reverend Gabriel Brodie never had
he did get smicha in the end, I think.
He did get smicha in the end, but I think it was an honorary smicha.
Oh, okay.
And Reverend Olsberg.
Oh, yeah.
Leslie Olsberg never had smicha. And do you know, you might not know this, Johnny, that your Rebbe also never had smicha?
Oh. No, I didn't.
Rabbi Bolkind never had smicha.
Oh.
Not that he couldn't have got smicha, because he certainly could, I'm sure. But he never had smicha, and originally he was known as Reverend Bolkind, and then of course that became Yiddish.
Rabbi Bolkind.
The Rebbe. Rebbe means teacher in Yiddish. So reverends in the UK, in the United Synagogue, are ministers who don't have smicha. So here, these three titles, Rabbi, Rav, and Rabban, all do have smicha.
Okay,
now,
well, my other suggestion, because I know that my niece's husband has smicha, but he was only got it in a couple of subjects and didn't get the full amount. So maybe that's what the difference is.
Okay, that was a fairly good suggestion, but it's not accurate, it's not correct, but it would be a good suggestion.
Haven't we looked at it before? You've got the fines is one, and then if you are able to shecht animals, or you know whether animals are kosher or not, is another level.
Yes, that's the Yora, Yodin, Yodin.
Yeah.
So when you can do the Yodin, Yodin, which is the monetary ones, then you're actually called something else altogether. You're called a Dayan. Okay. It's very simple, actually. And I gave you a bit of a clue earlier on, because what is our rabbi called in our shul, Johnny?
Rav Yuval.
Rav Yuval. So he has the title Rav. Okay, and what is the title that we give to the rabbis in Chutz La'aretz? We call them Rabbi. Okay, and it's quite simple. The title in the Gemarah, Rabbi, so Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi is the title given to rabbis who are ordained in the land of Israel. Okay, if you've got the title Rabbi in the Gemarah, then you have got Semicha in Israel. If you have the title Rav, as in Rav Ashi or Rav Acha, then you have your Semicha from Bavel, from Babylon, from outside the land of Israel. Okay, and Rabban, see if you can work that one out from the people that you know. You only know 3 Rabbans, at least I only know 3 Rabbans. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel himself, and Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. What did all those 3 have in common?
Were they head of the Sanhedrin?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. They were the Nasi, or the Av Bet Din. They were the head of the Sanhedrin, correct. So Rabban really means sort of that's the chief rabbi. Rabban is the chief rabbi, I suppose. That would be the equivalent title. So I don't know if any of you had ever paid any attention. I don't think I had paid much attention to the Gemarah as to who was a Rav and who was Rabbi, but that's actually the origin. So if we go back to the Gemarah, now we can see here in our little piece here, Amalei Rav.
Johnny, can you just enlighten us again on what you have to know to be, like yourself, become a rabbi? I mean, you can't know everything.
Okay, so as Julia said, there is a
Some rabbis do, but
there is a facility to. It depends what your smicha is in. As I explained last week, the different types of smicha here in current day usage. If you want to be a community rabbi, then you need to know. Basically, you need to know kashrut. Well, think about it. What do community rabbis have to answer on? Kashrut, Nida, Avelut, Shabbat, and what we call the cycle of life, all the Yomim Tovim, the Chagim, and all those things, Brit Milah. So cycle of life stuff, Avelut, Nida, Kashrut, Shabbat. It's a very broad curriculum, a very broad spectrum. You have to know all that, and I was examined in all of that. There were eight different topics that I had to learn. See if I can remember what they all were. Shabbat, Avelut, Kashrut. There was a special one for Basar v'Chalav, Nida, Orach Chaim, that's the cycle of life, and
6.
Dinei Chagim, that's 7. Can't remember what the 8th one was now. It'll come back to me. But those are the things that I did. Now, so that's the sort of community rabbi sort of smicha. Now, there will be other people who, for example, you know Alan Freeman, the dentist.
Yeah.
So he got smicha. His smicha was in Dinei Shabbat only. He may have got another one since then, but his first one was in Dinei Shabbat. So that's just that. I had a previous smicha, which actually nobody ever knew about, from Down West time many years ago, and that was only on Hilchat Refuah, on the halachas of medicine. Okay, I never used the title, obviously, but I had a semicha from him just on that subject, which meant that I had permission from him to paskin halacha in that subject only. So there's various different things you can do, and then the Yora which is sort of the traditional yeshiva type smicha that Dan got, that is largely, I mean, if you're going to be a community rabbi, you need to do the Ravu Manhig one as well, like I did. But the Yora one is basically kashrut, basar v'chalav, melicha, so that's salting, which I didn't do, because nobody today asks a community rabbi shilas on salting meat, because the butchers all do it for us. So I never did that. He did it. And Shabbat. So the Yora one is narrower than the Ravu Manhig one, but it's more Gemarah based. So it depends on, so it depends on where it comes from. So the more traditional Haredi yeshivot will do a much more Gemarah based one, whereas what I did was much more based on poskim. So we look at the Rishonim, Achronim, and the poskim, the modern day poskim, and I had to know sort of the range of all the modern poskim. So there are different types of smicha, and that's the sort of curricula. So it's largely tailored to the usage that you're going to do. Yes, David.
Yeah, can I just say, back in the day, in order to call yourself a reverend in the United Synagogue, there was a basic qualification.
Oh, really?
It was some kind of certificate for being a minister of religion, which included the very, very basics of the subjects that you covered. Plus, what was more important then was the knowledge of to be a Baal Koreh, to be a Baal Tefillah, and what they called homiletics, the art of giving sermons.
Interesting. And also the Moalim also were called reverend. I don't know whether that was an official title, but and Shochtim as well. Shimshon Olsberg, for example, who was probably your Moel, Johnny, or maybe his father.
I think it was Chaim Halpern.
Chaim Halpern. Well, Shimshon Olsberg was my Moel. And he was a sheikh and a moel, and he was known as reverend as well. So maybe maybe that was an honorific title as well, or maybe the mere fact that you actually got through the moel's exams, which were actually quite hard, and I'm sure the exams to be a sheikh are also hard. Maybe those were, you got the title reverend in the United Synagogue for that as well. Interesting.
Sign of respect as well.
Yes, I think that's what it was. It was really a sign of respect. I remember there was a chap who, I won't give a name, there was a chap who was the minister to small communities, who was known as Reverend something or other, and he used to go around being the minister for all the little communities. My dad used to call him the Malach HaMovis of small communities, because wherever he went, they used to close down. I'm sure it wasn't because of him, but the fact that they were on the way out, they got him. And he sort of finished them off.
Still going, he's still going, I think.
Is he?
He's still going,
Yeah. Anyway.
MW, is it? MW.
I couldn't possibly say. Anyway, so that's where we got to last week. And it's interesting, as I say, I hadn't paid much attention to the Gemara. Here we've got Rav Yehuda. Very interesting. Look at this. In our next piece of Gemara, we've got a Rav Yehuda, and 2 lines later here, we've got a Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, 2 different people with 2 different titles. Rav is the Yehuda that got his smicha outside of Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava is one that got his smicha in Eretz Yisrael. I'm going to read about him now in the next piece of Gemara. So, that's just finishing off what we did last week. So the question I left you with last week was this. Why did smicha not involve the laying on of hands? We've got it explicitly stated here by Rav Ashi. Bidat mamash samchin lay. Did he really lay on his hands? No, he didn't. He's got his smicha by being called the title Rabbi. So why not? That was a question that I asked. We learnt out the Semicha from Moshe Rabbeinu giving over his leadership to Yoshua, and he actually did lean on it. It says, "Vayismoch alav et yedehem et yadav." Vayismoch alav et yadav, or words to that effect. And he leaned his hands upon him. So, if that's the case, the question is, why did they not continue with that? Why did the Semicha, which is called Semicha after all, because of the leaning, why did it not involve leaning? And the answer was sent in the article that I sent you, that David sent to me. And it comes from, I shall show you where it comes from now. It comes from, let me just get it on the screen for you. It comes from Parashat Ba'alotecha, and it is in Bamidbar, chapter 11. It should be on the screen for you very shortly. You got it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Verse 16. Leon is not here, so I'll have to do it for him. Vayom Hashem el Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, Esfa li shivim ish miziknei Yisrael. Let's go back a bit. Let's go back to see what's going on here. This is what happened here was they were hungry, they wanted food, and they were moaning as usual. They wanted meat, and they said, we remember the fish that we ate in Egypt free of charge, the cucumbers, watermelons, leeks, how wonderful it was in Egypt. And now all we've got is this miserable man that comes down every time. And they've got this, all they've got is this miserable man, and they're crying for meat. So Moshe says, I can't be doing with this. He says, verse 12, he says, did I conceive this entire people? Did I give birth to them? That you say to me, carry them in your bosom as the nurse carries the suckling to the land you promised their forefathers? Where am I going to get meat from all these people? For they are crying to me, saying, give us meat to eat. So here we see and then a pasuk which again amazingly fits in with the time of year. Lo uchal anochi levadi laseit et kol ha'am hazeh ki chaved mimeni. I cannot carry this entire people. It's too hard for me. And this is the same concept in Megillat Eicha. Levadi, alone. The people sits alone, and Moshe is saying, I can't do all this on my own. So if this is the way you're going to treat me, please kill me. I cannot handle this anymore, says Moshe. I can't do it all on my own. So then verse 16, Vayom Hashem el Moshe. Hashem said to Moshe, okay, I'll help you out. Esfa li shivim ish. Gather 70 men, miziknei Yisrael, from the elders of Israel. Asher yadata. That you know personally to be the elders and officers, and take them to the tent of meeting, and stand them there with you. And I will come down. This is Hashem speaking, verse 17. V'dibarti imach sham, and I will speak with you there. Va'atzalti min haruach asher alecha v'samti aleihem, and I will take from the spirit that's on you and I'll put it on them. In other words, I will give them some of your stardust. Okay, they will have some of your ruach hakodesh, some of your Holy Spirit. V'nasu'u itcha b'masa ha'am. And they will bear with you, they will carry with you the burden of the people. And you need not carry it, you need not bear it alone. I need to just turn this off, don't know how to do it. Hang on. Right. So there we go. So the Ziknei Israel became the leaders. They became the rabbis. Okay. And that was it. Where do we see the leaning in this ceremony? We don't. And therefore, this is the source for the passing on of leadership, the giving over of Semicha, the giving over of Semicha without Semicha, okay, without doing the actual physical leaning. These 70 elders became rabbis, effectively, and they were there in front of the people, and I will speak with you there. Kadosh Baruch Hu did the speaking, and from here we learn that in order to bestow the title of rabbi, to do smicha, it's a matter of declaring ordination. These men were ordinated, that's not the right word, ordained at that time, and there was no smicha. So what we learn from this is that the original smicha that Moshe did with Yoshua was actually a one-off. It was the only one where there was physical laying on of hands, which I suppose raises the question as to why it's called smicha, because there isn't any smicha that goes on. There's no actual leaning that went on. Even classical smicha from Yoshua to the Zkenim all the way through, as we just learned in the Gemarah, there was no actual leaning of hands, and therefore to call it smicha is a little bit strange. But names stick, don't they? And that's what's been called. It's been called smichat rabbanim, and there we go. So this is the source. This is the answer to our question of last week, which is why if we are learning smicha from Joshua, we don't actually do smicha, and the reason is that we don't learn it from Joshua alone. Anyway, we learn it from the Zekenim, the elders, and there we go. There are the elders. By the way,
Can I?
Yes, go on, Julia.
I just wanted to ask. In historical order, wasn't the Zakanim before Joshua?
It was. Yes, it was indeed. It was indeed.
So Joshua really was an exception to the rule.
Yes, I think that's right. Joshua was the exception to the rule, which makes the title or the name of giving over smicha being smicha all the more strange, really. And I suppose that's this week's question. Why is it called smicha then? I don't know that I did actually try and find an answer to that, but I couldn't find one. It's just that one of those accepted things, I think, that it's called smicha, even though smicha was not actually done. So I think that more or less finishes off that little bit of the Gemarah. Let's go on to the next bit, and we will learn about Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Let me put the Gemarah back on the screen for you. Do you have it? Yes. Okay. So we're over here now. So we've just learned that it takes 3 people to do a smicha. We learned that. That was the beginning of last week's shiur. Over here, a couple of paragraphs up. How do we know that smicha is performed by 3 people? And then we said, well, if you're going to learn it from Joshua, that was only 1. And so if you're going to learn it from the fact that Moshe was worth more than 1 on his own, well, he was worth 71. So why don't we need 71? And the Gemarah says, kasha, that's a difficulty that they didn't have an answer to. We gave an answer that is given, not in the Gemarah, but in the Parashanim, the commentators, that Moshe is called Ha-Elohim, is referred to as Elohim, and David found us a few places where he's referred to as Elohim, and we know from our Gemarah, from our Mishnah, in fact, right at the beginning of this Perek, back in November 2019, that the word Elohim means a court of judges, And we know that a court of judges can't be any less than 3 because Elohim is plural and plural is 2, and you can't have an even number. So you add 1 and you've got your 3. So that is where we learn that 3 people need to do smicha. So now the Gemara is asking a question. We're over here now, the bottom of page 69, if you're following in the hard copy Gemara. Chad la samech. Hang on a minute, says the Gemara. Is it not the case that one person alone is allowed to do smicha? And in fact, we know that's true, because when you say to somebody, who gave you smicha, they don't say so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. They will say, Rabbi so-and-so gave me smicha, one person. So we know from modern day fact that it is, in fact, one person. But the Gemara at this point is asking the question. You've just told us it's 3, but I'm going to prove to you it's not 3, it's 2. It's 1. V'ha amar Rav Yehuda amar Rav. Did Rav Yehuda say in the name of Rav, Baram? Baram. It's a Baram means it's so over here. It tells you what it means. This Aramaic word found in the book of Daniel carries several different meanings among them. But yet and indeed. Some claim that it comes from the root Beit Resh Resh, whereas others believe it's an abbreviation of the term Bar Min, meaning except for. Biram, it's one of those words that don't really mean anything, like actually and basically. So, when somebody says to you basically, you know that really they don't really know what they're talking about. It's just one of those words that's thrown in to make it sound good. It's true, isn't it? What does basically mean? It doesn't mean anything. And actually doesn't mean anything either. Anyway, Baram seems to be one of those doesn't mean anything words. Zachor oto ha'ish latov. We remember this man for good. Which man are we talking about? We're talking about Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava Shmo. His name was Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. Just by the way, Zachor latov. Where have you heard that before? Come on, Johnny, I can see it's on the tip of your tongue. Where have you heard Zachor latov? Unmute yourself, Johnny.
In Kiddush. No.
In Kiddush?
No.
Don't think so.
Latov.
Zachor latov. Who do we remember for good? Zachor latov. I'll give you a clue. Purim.
Must be Esther.
What's no, it's not Esther. What's the song that we sing after we finish the Megillah?
Mordecai.
No, not Mordechai either. There's a good guess. Shoshanat Yaakov. Who do we remember for good? David, tell us, who do we remember for good at Purim?
Charvona.
Charvona. The Charvona Zachor latov. Who was Charvona in the Megillah? Charvona was one of the king's courtiers who he was the one that suggested to the king to hang Haman when the king was so angry that Haman wanted to destroy Esther's people, and he ran out into the garden and he was mad as hell, and he comes in and Mordechai and Haman is thrown himself on Esther at her mercy, and the king says, are you trying to rape the queen while I'm in the house at the same time? And Charvona pipes up and says, hey, look, there's the gallows that Haman has made for Mordechai. And the king says, Teluhu alav, hang him on them, hang Mordechai, hang Haman. And we remember Charvona latov and the song Shoshanat Yaakov that we sing, Shoshanat Yaakov. I can't remember all the words because it's gone out of my head. But we end up with Charvona Zachor Latov. We remember him for good. And do you know why we remember him for good? What great thing did he do? Wasn't that he was the greatest tzaddik, Charvona, but what he did was he taught us how to grab the moment, because Achashverosh is mad as hell at this moment, and he grabbed the moment and he said, look, there's the gallows. And he basically gave him the idea to hang Haman on the gallows. If he'd have left it a little while, Achashverosh, who we know was prone to fly off the handle, we know that with Vashti and everything, the Chamat HaMelech Shachacha, the anger of the king settled down. We know that what would have happened was he would have settled down, his anger would have abated, and he would have said, oh, well, okay, Haman's not so bad. Okay, so he'll just let Esther off and Mordechai off, but the rest of the Jews, they can go anyway. And the fact was that Charvona grabbed the moment, and he encouraged, as it were, he put the idea into Achashverosh's head. That's the genius of a person, is to do something and make somebody else think they've thought of it. My wife does it all the time with me, and probably all as men have that done to us too. So we this is why we remember Charvona Latov, because he teaches us to grab the moment. That was Zachor Latov. So Zachor Latov means remember somebody in a very positive light. And in our Gemarah here, the person that we're remembering is a chap called Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava. And the Gemarah goes as far as to say, look at this, She'il malei hu, were it not for him, il malei, that means were it not for. It's a common Gemarah expression. She'il malei hu, if it were not for him, for Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava, nishtakhu dinei knasot mi Yisrael. All the halachot of fines in Israel would have been forgotten. If it were not for him, the whole subject matter of the halachot of fining people, that might be a good thing, would have been forgotten if it weren't for him. How so? What did he do? So the Gemara says, what? Nishtakhu, it would have got forgotten. Nigrosinhu, we would have learned all about it. We don't need, what do you mean it would have been forgotten? We'd have learned them. Says the Gemara. And now we should have a party because we're moving on to the next page, 14a. Ela batlu dinei knasot mi Yisrael. What would have happened would have been that the halachot of implementation, the implementation of the halachot would have been cancelled in the whole of Israel. It's only through Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava that the halachot of fines in Israel were remembered, because it's only through him that they were able to be enacted. How so? Gemara tells us, Shepam achat, there was a time, Gazra Malchut Harsha'a, the wicked kingdom, Malchut Harsha'a, the wicked kingdom, Gazra, decreed, from the word Gezerah, decreed. Which is the wicked kingdom we're talking about, made decrees? Correct, Rome, the wicked kingdom of Rome. You'll see that in the Gemara, Rome is not mentioned by name. Where have we had earlier on in our Gemara where Rome was not mentioned by name? Those of you who have got a visual memory.
Yeah, well, it was a Roman soldier, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, wasn't it? Let's see if I can find.
And it was to do with the men who were pretending not to be doing something.
There he is. There he is. There's the Roman soldier. Can you see him? He's on page, where is he? On page 61, Daf Yud Bet. Only 2 pages ago. A long time ago we learned this, but it's only 2 pages ago. This is when they sent out messages in the time of the Romans about intercalating the year. And they sent a code. Remember, they sent a code. And the code was the one, they called him the eagle. because we had a whole discussion about whether the Nesher was an eagle or it was a vulture. Do you remember? And it was called the eagle because, of course, the Romans legions had the eagle there on their standards. There it is. So this was another time when they did not use the name of Rome. Here is referred to the Adomi, the Edomite. Why? Let's go back to Gemarah, page 69 on here. Oh, I've gone far too far there. We're years ahead there. Hang on. Here we go. So the page 70 actually. So why is it only referred to as the evil government and not by name? Why is it in code?
In case somebody accidentally read or came across what they were talking about.
The Romans were not unfamiliar with the teachings of the rabbis. Remember, this wasn't written down until 400, but the discussions went on from the Tanaim, which was at the time of the Mishnah, which was around about 200 CE, at a time when the Roman Empire was still at its peak in the Holy Land, and the Romans were not unfamiliar with the teachings of the rabbis, and therefore there was a significant amount of censorship, self-censorship actually. The rabbis changed various things around. They used code that we've just seen. Here's another bit of code. It's not particularly well coded, to be honest, but it's referred to in code, not explicitly, because it was dangerous to do so. And in fact, there are people who say that deep in the vaults of the Vatican, there are versions of the Gemarah, manuscripts of the Gemarah, which are uncensored and which have a great deal of anti-Christian and anti-Roman stuff in them, which have been censored out, either by the Christian censors or by the rabbis themselves, in order to be for self-preservation purposes. I am not a big expert on what's going on in the Vatican. My son, who's found this rather a fascinating subject and has studied it quite a lot, often speaks about the uncensored versions, and maybe next time he comes, please God, he's coming in January, maybe we'll get him to do a shiur on what's going on in the Vatican vaults, because it's quite interesting stuff. Anyway, here, Malchut HaRasha, the evil kingdom of Rome, Gazra, made a decree, Shmad al Israel. What's Shmad? Not Shmag.
Destroy.
Not
To
Shmag,
destroy.
Johnny.
Destroy.
Destroy, that's right. They made various gezerot, various decrees which were designed to break the Jewish people and to destroy Israel. And one of the decrees that they made was this: Shekol hasomech yehareg. Anybody who gives smicha, anybody who ordains a rabbi, yehareg, will be put to death. It was a capital crime in Rome, under the Romans in Israel. It was a capital crime to give smicha. V'chol hanismach yehareg, and the recipient of the smicha, the ordained person, that's the passive form. You can see nismach, that's a passive form. He who receives the smicha shall be put to death. A capital crime to give and a capital crime to receive smicha. And not only that, the ear and the city, shesomchin ba in which the smicha takes place, techarev. What word can you see there in that word techarev?
Sword. The sword.
Yes, cherev,
Sword.
a sword.
Oh,
Correct. What other word can you see connected with Tisha B'Av?
Korban.
Churban, correct. Churban is a destruction. Why is Churban a destruction? Because it involves killing with the sword. Cherev is a sword. So Techarev shall be destroyed. So not only the person giving smicha is killed, not only is the person receiving smicha, but the city where smicha is done is completely destroyed. This is the ruling of the Romans. And furthermore, utchumin shesomchin bahen ye'akru. And the tchum, what's the tchum Shabbat?
The limit where you can walk.
Correct. Which is how much, Johnny?
I'm guessing. I'm guessing. The 4,000 amas.
No, you were right first time.
2,000 amas.
Yeah, 2,000 amot in all directions from the edge of the city. Okay, so there's various explanations as to what this means. One explanation is that anybody found within the Tchum Shabbat of the place where Smicha is will also be destroyed. Because remember, back in the day, it's a bit like today, really, I suppose. There was there were sort of concentric areas of living. You either lived in the city, if you were wealthy, you lived in the city, within the city limits, within the city walls, because you were protected. And the poorer you were, the further you moved out from the center of the city. A bit like the opposite of today, really. As you get wealthier today, you move out further and further from the city into the suburbs, except it's all gone. That's what it was when we were young, wasn't it? It was all, the poor people lived in the inner city, in Manchester, you live in strange ways. And then as you got wealthier, you moved out to Broughton Park and Prestwich and Whitefield and Hale and Didsbury and all that further out. I can imagine the same in London. You lived in the East End, and then you moved out wherever, and then you moved out a bit further out to Golders Green and Hendon, and then Radlett and Boreham Wood and St Albans, until you end up in Birmingham. So that was how it was. As you progressed up the financial and economic ladder, you moved far away from the centre of the city. It's all gone on its head now, because centre city living is now the most expensive. You want to go and live in the centre of London, or the centre of Manchester, or the centre of Tel Aviv, that's now the most expensive place, not the suburb. Can't see the glick in it myself, but that's the way it is. But back in the day, there was a reason for it, because if you lived in the city, you were protected by the walls of the city from marauders that would come from outside. So if you could afford it, you lived within the city, but not everybody could afford it. So people lived outside of the city. And the poorer you were, the further away from the city walls you had to live. Because if you were close to the city walls, when you saw the marauders coming, you would quickly run into the city through the gate, and you would take protection in the city from the people from the walls of the city. So even though you weren't protected from them fully, if you were close enough, you could run in and be protected. So they were more expensive places to live than the places further out. Further out were the poorer people. So there were people living all within the tchum of the city, and this gezerah, this decree, was so harsh that anybody who got smicha, anybody who gave smicha, would cause the death not only of himself and his pupil, but everybody in the city. The city would be destroyed, and everybody in a 2,000 amma diameter living in that area would be killed. A really, really harsh decree. Another explanation for this tchumin shesomchin bahem, yeyakru. What does yeyakru mean? What does la'akor mean? It means to uproot, means to pull out. So another opinion is that as part of the punishment, the Romans would pull out the boundary markers. They used to make boundary markers so that you knew on Shabbat not to go any further. You know, I remember being in Monsey, New York, for a wedding, for an ufruf. Went on Shabbos where I was staying, and I was davening at this place in Yeshivat Or Sameach in Monsey. And my host said to me, "It's no problem. There's an Eruv all the way there. Or Sameach is within the Eruv. You can carry your talus." The kids were very little. Rena was was not yet 1 year old, so that we're talking 27 years old. I had the two older boys who were about 7 or 8 years old with me. I had my talus with me. I had a buggy. I probably had one of the kids in a buggy, and we were walking to shul from where we were staying towards Or Sameach. And about 2/3 of the way there, I see a sign that says the Eruv stops here. Now what do? I've got a buggy. I've got two kids. I've got pockets full of sweets to keep the kids quiet. I've got my talus. I've got a veritable storehouse of stuff I'm carrying. Still got 1/3 of the way to go, or I've got to schlep all the way 2/3 of the way back. I didn't know what to do. So what would you have done? Johnny, what would you have done in that situation?
I presume that the sign was the wrong way around. I'd turn it the other way around.
So you'd have turned the sign the other way around. Okay, that's a good idea. What would you have done? What would you have done?
I would have eaten the sweets.
David, what would you have done?
I hate to think. Probably, knowing me, I'd have done my homework first and checked on the Eruv bound before I got to the place.
Okay, well, I did the only sensible thing to do, which is to approach the nearest person who was walking to shul, who looked like he knew what he was talking about, with a big black hat. And I explained my dilemma. And he said to me, he said, take no notice of that. He says, that's the Hasidische Eruv. The Hasidische Eruv stops here. The Litvak Eruv carries on. And you can go to Or Sameach, it's in the Litvak Eruv. That's what we did. We carried on. So when you're in Monsey, you have to make sure that you know do your homework like David would have done before, and know that there are two Eruvs in Monsey. At least there was then, anyway. Anyway, so here, going back to our Gemarah.
When you go into northwest London, and if you go into 2 or 3, you'll see a sign that says there is no Eruv in this area.
Right. Okay, which is not technically true.
Well, except that they don't accept the authority of the Eruv from Aaron.
Yeah. Yes, I do remember that controversy. Does it still rage on?
Yes.
Yeah. We now have that pleasure in Manchester as well. Manchester was the last major Jewish city in the world to get an Eruv. That's really something to be proud of. Manchester is the most backward and retarded city in the entire world, Jewish world anyway. Anyway, back to our Gemarah. Some explain that this Chumin shesomchim b'hem yeyakru, that they uprooted the boundary markers of the Tchum. I must say that doesn't really fit with the rest of the Gezerah, really. The rest of the Gezerah fits better with the first explanation, which is that anybody living outside the city walls within the Tchum, within the 2,000 meters, would be killed. Now, we will see next week what Yehuda ben Bava did to merit this great Zachor Latov. We would say today, Zichrono Livracha, same idea, Zachor Latov, he's remembered for good. we've just set the scene here that there was a Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava lived at the time when the Romans had made this very harsh decree. We'll just finish by discussing why they were so keen on not making rabbis. Why were they so harsh? Why was the decree so harsh against making rabbis?
Because the rabbis taught the people, and if the people didn't have teachers, they would forget their religion.
Well, I think that's probably the nub of it. They learned their lesson from the Greeks. Because what did the Greeks do? The Greeks banned the learning of Torah. Okay, remember, we know that from the Hanukkah story. Okay, the Greeks wanted to Hellenize, make everybody into Greeks, and they banned the learning of Torah. How do we know that from the Hanukkah time? What do we do on Hanukkah? What do we play with? Dreidels. One of the explanations why we play with dreidels is that they were secretly learning Torah, and if any of the Greek soldiers came checking up on them, any of the policemen came to see what they were doing, they would quickly whip out this dreidel, and they would pretend to be playing this harmless spinning top game. So the dreidel came to be associated with Hanukkah because they were learning Torah secretly. Now, it didn't work, did it? We carried on learning Torah secretly. So the Romans were much cleverer than the Greeks, or else they learned from the Greek mistakes. And they said, okay, we can't stop them learning Torah in secret. It's just not enforceable. What is enforceable, though, is if you don't have any figures of authority, it's not that they won't learn the halachot, but they won't be able to implement the halachot, right? You can't have, you can't make halachot without a court, without a bet din. Okay, you can't do that. You have to have a rabbi, you have to have two rabbis, you have to have three rabbis, you have to have a bet din. So if there are no rabbis, it's all very well, you can learn stuff, but you can't implement it. And the Romans were clever enough to understand that something that you learn and don't put into practice will not sustain. The only reason that we have sustained Judaism all this time is because our learning of it has been transmitted into actual activity and action. Without ma'aseh, the limud is not a waste of time, but it won't sustain. It won't go on. And we learn that in Pirkei Avot as well, don't we? In Pirkei Avot, it says anybody who learns for the sake of doing, then his learning will sustain itself. If you learn without intending to do it, forget it. It won't sustain itself. Yes, David.
Yeah, just a couple of things here. First of all, very interesting in your text of the Gemarah, Rav Steinsaltz has got the word shmad. That word shmad doesn't appear in the Vilna text that I've got in front of me. And shmad, as we're aware, refers specifically to the period, I think it's 135 to 138 CE, which was the Hadrianic persecution, which was in response to the Bar Kochba. So yeah. We can date this from the version of the Gemarah that you have. Secondly, we've also got the connection to Tisha B'Av, because Yehuda ben Bava is one of the Asara Harugei Malchut. There's a kinnah dedicated to that we say on Tisha B'Av, and finally on Zachor Latov. I think what Johnny was thinking about when he said kiddush was benching.
Benching, yes.
Yeah.
Latov.
Yes, correct. I hadn't thought of that. Yes, very good. Excellent. Yes, that's interesting, that, David, about Shmad. I hadn't thought of that. I've got the Vilna Shas in front of me. The art scroll is a Vilna Shas, which I've got in front of me. And you're right, the word Shmad is not there. And yes, of course, Shmad that was the time of a very harsh period of time. The Emperor Hadrian clamped down on the Jews after the Bar Kokhba rebellion. Bar Kokhba was 133 to 136, I think, or thereabout. And thereafter, Hadrian came and really gave them what for. We know, again, connection with benching. What's the connection with benching? The fourth bracha, Hatov V'Ametiv, was instituted by the rabbis at that time because the city of Beitar was massacred by Hadrian's troops, and they weren't allowed to be buried. And it was later, when they were allowed to be buried, that the rabbis gave thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for, as it were, the blessing of being able to bury the dead in Beitar, and that was all around that period of time of Shmad, and that's another connection to benching and Zachor Latov. Very good.
The fact that the bodies didn't decompose so miraculously over that 3 period, and this is one of the sources of Tu B'Av. Right.
Yes. Tu B'Av. Again, at that period of time. Going just to the numbers, of course, talks there about 500,000 people in Beitar, and we're not going to go get too excited about the number 500,000, are we? Because we all know that the numbers are not exactly to be taken literally. Fine, I think we'll stop there since we're out of time as usual.
Johnny, can I just ask you?
Yeah, any questions, Johnny?
I've just looked in Shemona Esrei on Shabbat morning. It says Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko. Is that the same word, Yismach?
No, that's from the word Simcha, happiness.
Oh, for rejoicing, okay.
Rejoicing,
yeah. The other question I wanted to ask you was, if you would have failed on one of your 8 subjects, would you have not become a rabbi, or would you say try again or do it again? Or
I had to pass all of them. I could have another go. But I had to pass all of them. To pass the thing, you had to pass all of them. You didn't have to pass them all in one go. I mean, if I didn't, but if I'd failed one, I could have taken it again.
Yeah.
It was actually very tough, the one that I did, because for each of the 8 subjects, there were 2 exams. There was what they called a midterm. So halfway through, they did an exam. And then at the end of each topic, there was another exam. So there were 8 lots of 2, so it's 16 tests. And then right at the end, there was a big test on everything. So it was pretty tough, to be honest.
How do you become an examiner then?
You have to be, we're going to learn that in the Gemarah soon, actually.
Okay.
How you get to give Semicha is going to be discussed in the Gemarah. We'll get to that in a week or 2.
Okay, lovely.
Johnny.
Thank you.
Johnny.
Yeah. Yes.
When you showed us your Semicha certificate last week, it has the words under your name, Shlita. Could you explain what Shlita means?
May you live long, is it?
It stands for Sheyichye leYamim Tovim Arukim.
Yeah, should have long life.
He should live long and good days. It's just a nice thing to say. The Shlita is just actually. I'm so shlochish that it's still on my desk. I haven't even put it back yet. So I'll just show you the Shlita that you were referring to. There it is over there, where my little finger is over here. Shlita Sheyichye leYamim Tovim Arukim. You can see the little chupchiks before the Aleph, which indicates that it is an abbreviation, and it stands for Sheyichye leYamim Tovim Arukim, and it is a thing that you say after a rabbi's title. If you're not a rabbi, you don't get wished good and long life. I'm not sure why that should be the case. What you get if you're not a rabbi is Nun Yud. after your name. Do you know what that stands for?
Yeah.
Neiro Yair. May his candle light up. In other words, you should light up the world. It's an honorific. Those people that are bothered about it, always makes me laugh. Those people that are bothered about it like to have Shlita after their name, because that indicates that they're somebody of great importance. My rabbi in Manchester, Rabbi Sammy Goldberg, always used to talk about rabbinic inflation. He said when he was a lad, you had to be something to be a Rav. Now everybody's a Rav, and everybody's a Rav HaGaon, and everybody's a Rav HaGaon at Tzaddik. And he used to call it rabbinic inflation. So everybody's a Shlita and everybody's a Rav, and it don't mean anything. So that's one way of looking at it. But that's what Shlita stands for. So if you see somebody with Shlita, you're wishing him a long and good life. The other thing that you might see in a non-rabbi, as well as Nun Yud, you may say this. More often you see it for women than men. Ayin Mem Vav Shin. Amush. Ayin Mem Vav Shin. Any ideas what that stands for? David, you know? It stands very simple. You'll kick yourself when I tell you. Ad mea ve'esrim shana. Until 120. So apparently, women don't get their candle lit up. I've never seen a woman with Nun Yud after the name. I think that's reserved for men. Shlita's reserved for Rabbanim. Nun Yud for men. And Amush, Ad mea ve'esrim shana, can be for men or women. So those are the little abbreviations that and then, of course, at the beginning, you might see Hey, Reish, Chubchik, Gimel, which doesn't mean harag, to kill, although it might be. And you know what that one might stand for? A beginning of somebody's name.
Right.
David, you know this one, don't you?
Harav.
Harav HaGaon. Harav HaGaon. The rabbi, the genius. The Gaon is a genius. That's what Rabbi Goldberg was talking about. Everybody today is a Rav HaGaon. It's not good enough just to be a Rav. You've got to be a Rav HaGaon. That's the rabbinic inflation. So all these funny little titles.
Johnny, in Vine Street, when they called the Rav up, you say Yamod Ma'ena Harav.
Marenu Harav.
Marenu.
Marenu.
Yeah.
You know what that means? Actually, it's not Marenu. It's actually Morenu. Vav. We usually say Marenu, but it's incorrectly pronounced. It should be Morenu Harav, and that is usually reserved for the Rav of that particular community.
Of the shul, yes.
Because he is your teacher. He's the Rav of that community.
Yes.
Morenu Harav means our teacher, the Rav. So that's why Reb Lipper would have been called up as Morenu Harav. And also the chief rabbi in England is called Morenu Harav, because he is effectively the rabbi of all the communities. So he is called up as Morenu Harav. I don't know if I told you this. There was a guy in shul. We had a bris in. I think I might have told you this. There was a bris in shul a few months ago, and I wanted to give him an aliyah. And I sent Eli Tilson over to get his name, this Moel's name. And he came back to me, and Eli could hardly speak. He was laughing so much. I said, "What's so funny?" And he told me he wants to be called up as Harav Hagaon Hamohel, and then his name. He wanted all his titles. And anyway, so we gave him an aliyah, and I gave him all his titles, and he was very happy. In contrast to that, when Rav Ido was called up, he just wanted to be called up as Ido ben Mordechai. We never did. We always called him Morenu Harav.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
when I called him up anyway. But he always used to give me a dirty look when I did that, and I just used to do it to wind him up. But that's the opposite. Two ends of the spectrum. There's humility, and then there's the opposite.
I remember many, many years ago when a certain very pompous United Synagogue rabbi was visiting our community, and he insisted on calling himself up and Easter baby after the Aliyah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's something. Very good. Okay, any other questions, comments? Who would know that Gemarah was so interesting to learn, eh?
Yeah, fascinating.
Okay.
Thank you, Janet.
Let me just stop the recording.